My sister looked me dead in the eye and said I was the family disgrace. That was 30 seconds before her fiancé called me Your Honour. Want to know why the turkey wasn't the only thing roasted that Thanksgiving? If you've ever been the black sheep at family gatherings, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why staying silent was my biggest power move. And stick around, because what happens at dessert will leave you speechless. My name is Elena. I'm 31 years old and I live alone in a modest one-bedroom apartment on the east side of the city. I work long hours, keep to myself, and rarely visit my family. When I do show up to the occasional holiday dinner, I'm usually the one washing dishes in the kitchen while everyone else laughs in the living room. My family doesn't ask much about my job. They assume I'm just another office worker, shuffling papers somewhere downtown, and honestly, I've never corrected them. I've never. But before I tell you about the Thanksgiving that changed everything, you need to understand how I became invisible in my own family. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow fade, like watching a photograph lose its colour one shade at a time. I was 8 years old the first time I realised I didn't matter. It was my older sister Vanessa's kindergarten graduation. I know kindergarten graduation sounds ridiculous now, but back then it was a big deal to my parents. They arrived early, dressed up carrying a bouquet of flowers and a brand new camera. My mum's hair was perfect. My dad wore a tie. They took 100 pictures of Vanessa in her little cap and gown, posing with her teachers, holding her certificate. I remember standing at the edge of the school playground, clutching my own certificate from the same ceremony. I'd just graduated too. Same stage, same day, same accomplishment. But when I walked over to show them, my mum barely glanced down. Elena, stop being so needy. This is your sister's day. I was 8. I didn't know what needy meant, but I knew it wasn't good. So I stood there, alone, holding my certificate, watching my parents fuss over Vanessa like she'd just won a Nobel Prize. I don't think they took a single picture of me that day. I kept that certificate in my desk drawer for years, like proof that I'd actually been there. Proof that I existed. That was the first time. But it wasn't the last. When I turned 15, I got a full-ride scholarship to a prestigious university. I was so proud. I'd worked harder than anyone I knew, staying up late studying while my friends went to parties. I maintained a perfect GPA, volunteered every weekend, and wrote an essay that made my English teacher cry. The scholarship was merit-based, competitive, and life-changing. I couldn't wait to tell my parents. I chose dinner that Friday night. I even helped cook, marinated the chicken, set the table, made sure everything was perfect. When we all sat down, I took a deep breath and announced the news. I got the Whitman Scholarship, full tuition, all 4 years. My dad nodded once, chewing his food. My mum said, "That's nice, honey," without looking up. And then, not even 10 seconds later, she turned to Vanessa and started gushing about how Vanessa had been asked to model part-time for a local boutique. Can you believe it? They said she has the perfect look. This could really open doors for her. The rest of dinner was spent talking about Vanessa's modelling contract, her photo shoots, her potential. My scholarship, the thing I'd worked years for, was mentioned once and forgotten in the same breath. I sat there, pushing chicken around my plate, feeling that same familiar ache from when I was 8 years old. I learned something that night. Being good at things wasn't enough. You had to be the right kind of impressive. And apparently I wasn't. But the moment that truly broke something inside me happened when I was 20 years old. I graduated from college a full year early, summa cum laude, and got accepted into one of the top law schools in the country. It was the proudest moment of my life. I mailed the graduation invitation to my parents 2 months in advance. I called them. I reminded them. I even offered to buy their plane tickets. The day of my graduation, I sat in the crowded auditorium in my cap and gown, scanning the audience for their faces. I kept checking my phone. They'll be here, I told myself. They wouldn't miss this, but they didn't come. An hour after the ceremony ended, my mom called. Her voice was light, casual, like she was calling to ask about the weather. Eleanor, I'm so sorry we couldn't make it. Vanessa's birthday party was today. You remember, right? She really needed us here. You understand. I stood there in the empty parking lot, still holding my diploma, watching families hug and take pictures all around me. Vanessa's birthday wasn't even a milestone. She was turning 23. It was just another party. But they chose it over my graduation. That's when I realized the truth I'd been avoiding my whole life. I would never be enough for them. It didn't matter what I achieved, how hard I worked, or how much I proved myself. I wasn't the golden child. I was the backup, the afterthought, the one who didn't need attention because I was independent. So I stopped trying. I stopped calling every week. I stopped sending updates about my life. I stopped hoping they'd ask. And you know what? They never did. 5 years passed. I kept my head down, worked harder than ever, and built a life they knew nothing about. At 25, I became an assistant district attorney, one of the youngest in the state. I prosecuted cases that made the local news. I won trials that more experienced attorneys had turned down. I worked 80-hour weeks, skipped vacations, and earned a reputation for being relentless in the courtroom. But I never told my family. I let them believe I was still just a legal secretary or a paralegal, some vague office job they didn't care enough to ask about. I wanted to see if anyone would notice. If anyone would care enough to say, "Wait, Elena, what exactly do you do?" No one ever did. When I was 26, I came home for Christmas. It was one of the few times I made the effort. I drove 3 hours through a snowstorm because my mom had guilted me into it, saying it wouldn't be Christmas without the whole family. I should have known better. When I walked in, Vanessa was already holding court in the living room, showing off her new designer handbag and talking about her latest Instagram campaign. My parents were glued to her, laughing at every story, praising every little update. I stood in the doorway for a full 2 minutes before anyone even said hello. Dinner was worse. Vanessa sat at the head of the table, my dad's usual spot, while my parents flanked her like guards of honor. I was given a folding chair near the kitchen door, close enough to jump up and refill drinks or grab more food. It wasn't said out loud, but the message was clear. You're here to serve, not to be celebrated. When it came time to open presents, I watched Vanessa unwrap a brand new iPad, a pair of expensive boots, and a weekend trip to a spa resort. My parents beamed as she squealed over each gift. Then my mom handed me a card. Just a card. Inside was a generic Merry Christmas message and a $20 Starbucks gift card. My dad noticed me staring at it. He shrugged. "Elena, you're so independent. You don't need much anyway." I smiled, nodded, thanked them, and I hated myself for it. That night, lying on the old pull-out couch in the basement, I made a decision. I wasn't going to keep doing this. I wasn't going to keep showing up just to feel small, but I also wasn't going to fight for their attention anymore. I was done begging to be seen. I'd just let them think whatever they wanted, and if they never asked, I'd never tell. The breaking point came a year later when my grandmother passed away. She was the only person in my family who ever really saw me. Growing up, she'd slip me $20 bills and whisper, "You're going to do big things, Elena. Don't let them make you small." She believed in me when no one else did. When she died, I was 27. I took time off work to help plan the funeral, wrote her eulogy, and showed up early to the service. But when it came time to speak, my mother pulled me aside. "Vanessa's going to give the speech, honey. She's just better at public speaking. You understand, right? We don't want people to feel uncomfortable." I stared at her. Vanessa barely visited our grandmother. She didn't even call on her birthday last year. But sure, let Vanessa do it. I didn't argue. I just sat in the back row and listened to my sister deliver a speech filled with memories that weren't hers. After the service, my mother pulled out my grandmother's will. There wasn't much: a few pieces of jewellery, some savings bonds, and an antique ring my grandmother had worn every day of her life. In the will, she'd left that ring to me. She'd written a note, "For Eleanor, who has always had the strongest heart." I held that ring in my hand and felt, for just a moment, like someone had finally chosen me. But my mum took it from me before I even left the funeral home. "Vanessa will appreciate this more, Eleanor. You're not really a jewellery person anyway. And look, it matches the bracelet she's wearing." She slipped it onto Vanessa's finger. Vanessa didn't even say thank you. She just admired it in the mirror and posted a photo on Instagram an hour later with the caption, "Grandma's Legacy." I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I just walked out, got in my car and drove home. That was the moment I realised I didn't just feel invisible, I'd been erased. And the worst part, I'd let it happen. That was 4 years ago. I'm 31 now. I don't go home for birthdays. I don't call on holidays. I send a card at Christmas and a text on Mother's Day, and that's it. My parents don't seem to notice, or if they do, they don't care enough to mention it. I moved on. I built a life. I made partner at my firm. Well, not partner exactly, but something better. Something I worked for, something I earned, but I still haven't told them. Because here's the thing. If they never cared enough to ask, why should I bother to tell them? So when my mum called me in mid-October, I almost didn't pick up. I was in the middle of reviewing case files, and her name flashing on my screen felt like an unwelcome interruption. But I answered anyway. Old habits die hard. Elena. Her voice was sharp, impatient, like I'd already done something wrong. "You're coming home for Thanksgiving this year. No excuses. Not, we'd love to see you. Not, we miss you. Just a command." "I'll see if I can—" "You will," she cut me off. "Vanessa is bringing her fiancé. We need to look like a complete family. It's important." And there it was. I wasn't being invited because they wanted me there. I was being summoned to play a role, the supporting character, the extra body in the family photo. "Fine," I said. "I'll be there." "Good, don't be late." She hung up before I could say anything else. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling that old familiar knot in my stomach. But this time, something was different. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't even disappointed. I was just tired. I called my best friend Maya. We met in law school and stayed close ever since. She knows everything about my family, every snub, every slight, every time I've been pushed aside. She's the only person who really gets it. "Let me guess," Maya said when she picked up. "Your mom called." "Thanksgiving," I said flatly. "Mandatory attendance. Vanessa's bringing her fiancé." "And they need you there to complete the picture." "Exactly." Maya was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Why don't you just tell them who you are? Show up in your robes. Make them see you." I laughed, but it came out bitter. Because if they cared, they would have asked. I'm not going to beg for their respect. So why go at all? That was the question, wasn't it? Why was I still doing this? "Because," I said slowly, "this will be the last time. I'll go, I'll be polite, and then I'll walk away from them forever. Clean break." Eleanor, I mean it, Maya, I'm done. I just need closure. She sighed. Sometimes people don't deserve your silence, you know. They deserve the truth, especially when it embarrasses them. I smiled a little at that. I'm not going there to prove anything. I'm going to say goodbye. But deep down, I wondered if that was really true, because part of me, maybe a bigger part than I wanted to admit, was curious. What would happen if they found out? Would they care? Would they apologize? Or would they find a way to make it about Vanessa anyway? The week before Thanksgiving, I got a notice from the courthouse. There was a major zoning case scheduled for Monday, right after the holiday. High profile. A big real estate company fighting the city over development permits. It was going to be a messy trial, and I'd be presiding over it. I skimmed the file. The CEO's name was Marcus Hamilton. I didn't recognize it, but that wasn't unusual. I saw dozens of cases a month. I closed the file and packed my bag for Thanksgiving. One last trip, one last dinner, and then I'd finally be free. The drive to my parents' house took 3 hours. I left early Thursday morning, before the traffic got bad, and spent most of the drive in silence. No music, no podcasts. Just the hum of the engine and my own thoughts circling like vultures. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my stomach was in knots. The house looked the same as it always did. Neat, suburban, perfectly maintained. The kind of house that looked warm and inviting from the outside but felt cold the moment you stepped through the door. I sat in my car for a minute, gripping the steering wheel, and whispered to myself, "Just one more day. You can do this." Then I grabbed my bag and walked up to the front door. My mother answered on the second knock. She didn't smile. She looked me up and down like she was inspecting a uniform and said, "Oh, you actually came. Go help in the kitchen." Not hello, not good to see you, just an order. I stepped inside. My dad was in the living room, glued to the TV, watching football. He glanced up for half a second, grunted something that might have been a greeting, and went back to the game. And then I saw her, Vanessa. She was standing in the hallway, all done up like she was going to a photo shoot. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect outfit. She looked me up and down and smirked. "Still dressing like you shop at thrift stores, I see." I didn't respond. I just walked past her into the kitchen and started washing the dishes that were already piled in the sink. "This is fine," I told myself, "just a few more hours." But I had no idea how wrong I was. Around 2 p.m, Vanessa's fiancé arrived. I heard the door open, heard my parents' voices light up with excitement, and I knew without looking that this was the man they'd been waiting for. Marcus Hamilton. I stayed in the kitchen, scrubbing a roasting pan, listening to the introductions happening in the next room. Vanessa's voice was high and giggly, the way it always got when she wanted to impress someone. My parents sounded starstruck. "Marcus, it's so wonderful to finally meet you. We've heard so much about you. Vanessa is so lucky." I rolled my eyes and kept scrubbing. An hour later, we all sat down for dinner, and that's when everything started to fall apart. The seating arrangement was exactly what I expected. My parents sat at the head of the table, Vanessa and Marcus, on the right side like they were royalty. And me? I was stuck in the corner, closest to the kitchen door, so I could jump up and serve food whenever someone needed something. I sat down quietly, folded my hands in my lap, and waited for it to be over. But Vanessa wasn't going to let me off that easy. As my mom passed around the mashed potatoes, Vanessa launched into a story about Marcus's company, how successful he was, how important, how he was expanding his real estate empire all over the state. My parents ate it up, asking questions, laughing at his jokes, treating him like he'd just discovered the cure for cancer. And then Vanessa turned to me. "Marcus, don't mind Elena. She's just, she works some office job downtown. Nothing too exciting." I felt my jaw tighten. I didn't look up from my plate. My mom laughed lightly and added, "Elena never really fit in with the family's ambitions. She's always been more of a background person." I gripped my fork a little tighter. Marcus didn't say anything. I assumed he was just nodding politely, probably uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was going. But I didn't look at him. I didn't want to see the pity in his eyes. And then Vanessa went in for the kill. She leaned back in her chair, smiled sweetly and said, "Honestly, Marcus, don't take it personally. She's basically the family disgrace. No career, no achievements, nothing to show for herself." The table went quiet for a second. My mother didn't correct her. My father didn't defend me. They just sat there, letting the words hang in the air like they were an accepted fact. I set my fork down. My hands were shaking. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stared at my plate and thought, this is it. After today, I'm never coming back. But before I could stand up and leave, I heard a chair scrape against the floor. I looked up. Marcus was standing. His face had gone pale. He was staring at me, really staring, like he'd just seen a ghost. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice tight. Are you Judge Elena Hartley?" The room went silent. I met his eyes and nodded slowly. "Yes." And then Marcus did something I'll never forget. He bowed. Not a casual nod. A full, respectful bow, the kind you give someone with real authority. "Your Honor," he said, his voice shaking slightly. I didn't realize. I'm so sorry. I had no idea you'd be here." My mother's fork clattered onto her plate. Vanessa's mouth fell open. My father looked like someone had just slapped him. And me? I just sat there, perfectly still, and watched as the truth found its own stage. The silence that followed was deafening. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant noise of a neighbour's lawnmower outside. Marcus straightened up slowly, his face still pale, his eyes never leaving mine. He looked like a man who'd just realised he'd walked into the wrong courtroom at the wrong time. "Your Honour," he said again, more formally this time. "I had no idea you'd be here. I'm scheduled to appear before you on Monday, the Hamilton Development zoning case. I apologise for any—" "What?" Vanessa's voice cut through the air like a knife. She stood up so fast her chair almost tipped over. "What did you just call her?" Marcus turned to her, his expression tight. "Judge Elena Hartley. She's the district court judge presiding over my company's case on Monday." My mother's hand went to her chest. "Judge? Elena? There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake," Marcus said, and I could hear the strain in his voice. He was trying to stay professional, but the shock was written all over his face. "Judge Hartley is one of the youngest judges in state history. She was appointed 3 years ago. Everyone in the legal and business community knows who she is." My father stood up slowly, his face red. "Eleanor, is this true?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small under his gaze. I felt calm, steady, like I'd finally stepped into a version of myself they could never touch. "Yes," I said simply. "It's true." Vanessa let out a strangled laugh. "That's impossible. You're a secretary. You work in some random office downtown." "No," I said, my voice even. "I'm a judge. I have been for 3 years." "But," my mother's voice cracked, "why didn't you tell us?" I tilted my head slightly, like I was considering the question for the first time. "You never asked." The words landed like a slap. My mother flinched. My father looked away. Vanessa's face twisted into something ugly, something I'd never seen before. "That's ridiculous," Vanessa snapped. "You let us think you were nobody. You humiliated us." I stood up slowly, placing my napkin on the table. "I didn't do anything, Vanessa. You humiliated yourselves." Marcus took a step back, looking between Vanessa and me like he was trying to figure out how to escape. I think I should go." "No!" Vanessa grabbed his arm. "Marcus, wait. She's just... But Marcus gently pulled his arm free. "Vanessa, we need to talk, privately." "Marcus, now." He walked toward the front door without looking back. Vanessa stood there for a second, her face flushed, her hands trembling. She shot me a look of pure venom before following him out. The door slammed behind them, and then it was just me and my parents, standing in the dining room, surrounded by half-eaten food and shattered illusions. My father cleared his throat. "Eleanor, I don't understand. Why would you keep something like this from us?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out sharp and bitter, and I saw my mother wince. "You really don't get it, do you?" I said. "You want to know why I didn't tell you? Because I wanted to see if you'd care enough to ask, if you'd notice, if just once you'd look at me and wonder what I was actually doing with my life." "We thought you were fine," my mother said weakly. "You always seemed so independent." "I was 25 when I became a prosecutor," I said, and my voice was rising now, all the years of silence finally breaking through. 25. I was one of the youngest in the state. I prosecuted cases that made the news. I won trials that other attorneys wouldn't touch. And you know what? I invited you to every single milestone, every promotion, every achievement. You just chose not to come. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't know they were important." "Everything was important," I shouted, and I felt something crack open inside me. My law school graduation, my swearing-in ceremony, my first major trial, I told you about all of it. I sent you invitations. I called. I reminded you, and every single time you chose Vanessa, every single time. My father's face was red now, but not with anger, with shame. "If you had just told us—" "I did tell you," I said, and my voice dropped to something cold and final. "You just didn't listen." My mother took a step toward me, her hands reaching out like she wanted to fix this with a hug. "Elena, please, we didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." I stepped back out of her reach. "You meant every word, every dismissal, every time you put Vanessa first, every time you made me feel like I was invisible. You meant all of it." "We're your family," my father said, and his voice cracked. "You can't just throw that away over this." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a quiet, settled certainty. "You threw me away a long time ago," I said. "I'm just finally accepting it." I picked up my purse from the chair and walked toward the door. My mother followed me, her voice high and desperate. "Eleanor, please, don't leave like this. We can talk about this. We can fix this." I stopped at the door and turned around one last time. My mother was crying. My father looked lost, and I realized that this was the first time they'd ever really seen me. Not the version they wanted me to be, not the background character they'd written me as, but me, the real me. And it was too late. "For 31 years, I said quietly, I tried to be enough for you. I worked harder than anyone I knew. I achieved things most people only dream of, and it was never enough. I finally realized I don't need to be, not for you. Elena, goodbye." I walked out the door, down the steps, and across the lawn to my car. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. I just got in, started the engine, and drove away. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt free. The drive home was a blur. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call Maya. I just drove, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind surprisingly quiet. I thought I'd feel something, anger, sadness, regret. But all I felt was relief, like I'd been carrying a weight my entire life and had finally set it down. When I got back to my apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my couch, and stared at the wall. My phone buzzed, text after text. My mother, my father, even Vanessa. I didn't read any of them. I just turned my phone off and went to bed. The next morning I woke up to silence. No missed calls, no frantic voicemails, just quiet, and it felt good. I spent the rest of the weekend preparing for the Monday trial. The Hamilton development case was going to be complicated. Zoning laws, environmental concerns, community opposition. It was the kind of case that could make or break a company. And Marcus Hamilton was going to be sitting in my courtroom, watching me do the job he never knew I had. Part of me wondered what he was thinking right now. Was he panicking? Was he talking to his lawyers about whether he could request a different judge? Was he replaying that dinner in his mind, cringing at every word Vanessa had said? I didn't feel sorry for him. He'd been polite at the table, sure, but he hadn't said anything when Vanessa called me a disgrace. He'd just sat there silent until he realized who I was. That's how it always worked, wasn't it? People only respected you when they needed something from you. Monday morning came and I put on my robe, tied my hair back, and walked into the courtroom like I did every other day. Professional, composed, untouchable. The gallery was packed. This case had drawn a lot of attention. Local business owners, environmental activists, journalists. And sitting in the front row, looking significantly less confident than he had at Thanksgiving, was Marcus Hamilton. Our eyes met for a split second. He nodded respectfully. I gave him nothing in return. The trial proceeded exactly as it should. I listened to both sides, asked the right questions, and made my rulings based on the law. Marcus's lawyers were good, but the city's case was stronger. By the end of the day, it was clear which way the decision was leaning. When I called a recess, Marcus approached the bench. His lawyer tried to stop him, but he waved him off. "Your Honour," he said quietly, "may I speak with you, off the record?" I looked at him for a long moment. "You have 60 seconds. He glanced around, making sure no one was close enough to hear. "I need to apologise for what happened at Thanksgiving. I should have said something at that table. I should have stopped Vanessa. I didn't, and I'm sorry." "You're apologising because you need me to rule in your favour," I said flatly. "No," he shook his head. "I'm apologising because it was wrong. What they said to you, what I let them say, it was wrong. And I've been thinking about it all weekend." I studied his face. He looked sincere, tired but sincere. "Your apology is noted," I said, "but it doesn't change anything. I'll make my ruling based on the evidence, not on personal matters. Is that clear?" "Yes, Your Honour." "Good. Now step back." He did. And I went back to my chambers, closed the door, and allowed myself one small, satisfied smile. That evening, I finally turned my phone back on. The texts from my family had stopped, but there was one new message, from Vanessa. "We need to talk. This isn't over." I deleted it without responding. 3 months passed. Life went on. I worked. I ruled on cases. I went to dinner with Maya. I took a weekend trip to the coast. I lived my life, quietly, independently, and without the constant weight of my family's expectations pressing down on me. I didn't hear from them again. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits, and honestly, I didn't miss them. One afternoon in late February, I was leaving the courthouse when I saw Marcus standing by the parking lot. He was alone, no lawyers, no Vanessa, just him, holding a cup of coffee and looking like he'd been waiting for a while. I slowed down but didn't stop. "Mr. Hamilton." "Judge Hartley." He stepped forward. "I'm not here about the case. That's over. You ruled, I lost, and I moved on. I'm here because I owe you a real conversation." I crossed my arms. "You have 2 minutes." He took a breath. "I broke up with Vanessa. The day after Thanksgiving, actually. I couldn't be with someone who treated people like that. Especially family." I didn't respond. I just waited. "I know this doesn't change anything," he continued. "I know you don't owe me forgiveness or even acknowledgement. But I needed you to know that I saw what happened that day. And I've been thinking about it ever since." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you deserved better." His voice was quiet, sincere. "From all of them. And I should have said that at the table. I didn't, and I'll regret that for a long time." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something I hadn't expected. Genuine regret, not because he lost the case or the girl, but because he'd been complicit in something cruel. "Thank you," I said finally, "for saying that." He nodded. "For what it's worth, I think you're incredible. The way you handled everything, that dinner, the trial, all of it. You didn't let them diminish you. That takes real strength." I felt something soften in my chest, just a little. It wasn't strength, it was survival. "Maybe," he said, but it looked like strength from where I was standing. We stood there for a moment, the February wind cold around us. Then I nodded once and walked to my car. He didn't follow. He just watched me go, hands in his pockets, and I wondered if maybe, in some small way, he understood. That night, I sat in my apartment with a cup of tea and thought about everything that had happened. About the little girl who stood alone at her kindergarten graduation. About the teenager whose scholarship didn't matter. About the young woman who graduated alone. About the judge who finally stopped waiting to be seen. People ask me now if I regret not telling my family sooner, if I regret keeping my success a secret. And the truth is, I don't. Because their reaction to finding out taught me everything I needed to know. They didn't care about my success. They didn't care about my achievements. They cared about being embarrassed in front of someone important. And that's when I realized you don't owe anyone access to your accomplishments, especially people who never celebrated your efforts. I didn't need them to validate me. I just needed to stop waiting for them to. So I built a life, a good life, a life where I wake up every morning and know that I earned every single thing I have, not because someone handed it to me, not because I was the favorite, but because I worked for it. And that's worth more than any family dinner ever could be. A few weeks ago, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. It was from my mother. I almost threw it away, but something stopped me. Curiosity, maybe, or just the need for closure. I opened it. The letter was short, 4 sentences. "Elena, I'm sorry we didn't see you. I'm sorry we didn't ask. I'm sorry we made you feel invisible. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know." I read it twice. Then I folded it back up, put it in a drawer, and closed it. Maybe one day I'll respond. Maybe I won't. But for now, I'm okay with the distance. I'm okay with the silence. I'm okay with living a life where I don't have to prove myself to people who should have believed in me from the start. Because here's the thing they never understood. I didn't need their approval. I just needed them to care. And when they didn't, I learned to care for myself, and that made all the difference. I still see Marcus around sometimes. We're professional, cordial. He nods when we pass in the courthouse hallway. I nod back. There's no animosity, no awkwardness, just mutual respect. Last week, he stopped me after a hearing. I heard Vanessa's been trying to reach out to you, he said carefully. She has. I kept my expression neutral. I haven't responded. He nodded. She's struggling. The breakup hit her harder than she expected. She's been asking about you. That's not my problem, I said, and I didn't say it meanly. I just said it honestly. I know. He paused. But for what it's worth, I think she's starting to realize what she lost. Not me. You. I looked at him. Do you think she actually cares? Or does she just care that people found out she treated me like that? He didn't answer right away. Then he said quietly, I think she cares that people know who you are now, and who she isn't. I nodded. Then she hasn't learned anything. No, he agreed. She hasn't. We stood there for a moment. Then he said, You're better off without them, you know. All of them. I know. And I did. I really did. That night I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat on my balcony. The city stretched out in front of me, glittering and alive. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who wanted so desperately to be seen, to be loved, to matter. And I realized something. I do matter. I always did. They just couldn't see it. But that was never my fault. It was theirs. So here's what I want to say to anyone who's ever felt invisible in their own family. To anyone who's worked hard and been ignored. To anyone who's been called the black sheep, the problem, the disgrace. You are not the problem. You never were. Sometimes people can't see your value because they're too focused on someone else, and that says everything about them and nothing about you. You don't owe them your achievements. You don't owe them your time. You don't owe them access to the life you built without their support. What you owe yourself is the freedom to walk away, to stop waiting, to stop hoping, to finally choose yourself. And when you do, you'll realize something incredible. You were never invisible. You were just standing in a room full of blind people. So walk out, close the door, and build a life so bright that no one can ignore it, not because you need them to see you, but because you finally see yourself. That's what I did. And I've never looked back. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever worked hard for something, only to realize the people you wanted to impress never even noticed? Drop a comment below, share your story. Because I promise you, you're not alone, and you're not invisible. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Because there are more stories like this, more truths that need to be told. And remember, sometimes walking away isn't giving up, it's finally choosing yourself. And that's the bravest thing you can do.